everyone. Welcome back to Falcons Central Radio on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. My name is Aaron Freeman. I'm over at falcfans.com. I'm joined by my co-host Scott Karasik, who can we officially announce it now, Scott?
Might as well.
Okay. Well, who is the latest addition to the Falcoholic family, Scott Karasik, formerly of Pro Football Spot and Bleacher Report, now is spreading himself around to other Falcons blogs. This week we have with us our guest star, I guess we could still call him, Charles McDonald, who is also of the Falcoholic family. He's the guy who's doing the tape stuff. He's doing draft stuff, formerly of Football Savages, formerly of a lot of stuff. Charles has been all over the place as well. But yeah, we're back this week to talk about the Atlanta Falcons as we usually do on this show. We're going to talk about their Week 12 loss to the Minnesota Vikings. We'll preview their upcoming Week 13 matchup against the Tampa Bay Bucks. We will talk about the worst Thomas Dimitroff contracts, the worst contracts of the Thomas Dimitroff era. And then, as usual, we will answer all your mailbag questions at the end of the show. So we'll welcome you back to the show, Charles. I think this is, your third or fourth appearance this season?
Yeah.
It's basically you just want to come on and talk about Vic Beasley. So
not anymore.
Well, I mean, you can say that maybe this was his best game in a while. Wouldn't you say this against the Vikings?
Yeah, I mean the one where he ran right by T.J. Clemmings and then had Teddy Bridgewater right in his sights and Bridgewater just kind of shoved him off. That was bad, but he played pretty well besides that, rushing the passer at least.
Yeah.
Should have Goldberged it up, just speared him and been like, oh, that would have been brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I don't know what to say about Beasley. He's going to be a work in progress, but I think he's well on his way to being good. It just may not happen in 2015. And maybe last week was a confidence boost for him, and maybe he'll be able to destroy Gosder, Cherilus, and Donovan Smith this week, since they are arguably the worst pair of starting tackles in the NFL. So, hoping maybe this is the week. But let's talk a little bit more about the Vikings game. And I don't know that many people that really expected the Falcons to win this game. Obviously, there were some, but even that being said, I think most people were disappointed with how they played, that the Falcons were, at least for a time in this game, within reach of really making it interesting, and they didn't do that. They had turnovers again. One of them or two of them came in the red zone again. So what were your guys' thoughts on how the Falcons played on Sunday?
I mean, I may be the only one who thinks this, but that clipping penalty destroyed any momentum the running game had at that point. Like in the end zone at the end of the third quarter when Tevin Coleman scored a touchdown and it got called back for clipping, and it brought the Falcons ahead, or it brought them the tide. No, it brought them ahead, I think, 10-7, and then they called the penalty, and then Ryan threw the pick afterwards. And then you go back and you watch the film and you're like, that's not really clipping. That's not really a personal foul. It might be holding, it might be something else, but it's not clipping because he hit him in front. And then he hit him from behind. But when he first engaged, it was from in front. It didn't make sense based on the rule that it should have been called. So
I disagree with you. Yeah.
You're the only one who I've talked to who thinks that wasn't that was actually the right call on that penalty. And I'm not talking like Falcons fans. I'm talking like people from bigger sites that have told me like, hey, dude, that was a bad call.
It was.
Let's put it this way: when Matt Miller's agreeing with me that was a bad call, it's probably a bad call.
Okay. Well, we now know that Matt Miller is the bestower of truth when it comes to bad calls, I guess.
No, I'm just saying he never agrees with me on the refs, and
Yeah.
he was like, "Man, that was a bad call."
I'm joking. Charles, what were you thought were some of the game-changing plays against the Vikings?
I mean, in general, it's just another bad, sloppy Falcons football game that we've seen way too much of over the past 5 or 6 weeks, I guess now. So, I mean, the first of the Tevin Coleman fumble where he was 50 yards down the field and then fumbled and Barr punched it out, that was bad. The red zone pick to Tammy was another game changer because when you get to the red zone, like, you got to convert. You got to at least get a field goal out of those chances. And we've disagreed on Twitter about the process of the throw, but the result was like, it was inarguably terrible. Whether you agree whether he should thrown out of bounds or gone for it, getting a pick there was an absolute killer. And then I thought the clipping was a big game changer, but even then you're still 10, 15 yards out from the end zone. You got to figure out a way to score a touchdown and get points out of that drive. And
how was there not a single target to Julio after that? That's what I don't understand there.
Yeah, I don't know. At some point, you got to just take a flyer to Julio and just throw it up to him and just think, he's arguably the best receiver in the league. You got to give him a chance to come down with it. But yeah, 3 turnovers, a handful of drop balls. It's just what we've been given the past 6 games or so. And I mean, until they fix it, there's not really a guaranteed win left on the schedule, and that's like the most frustrating thing. Because I think our expectations kind of got blown out of proportion starting 5-0, but man, like, they've just looked horrible like these past 6 weeks, and it's really tough to pull away positives from these games.
Well, there's a couple positives. The first one is the Falcons are getting back our good friend Devontae Freeman, and hopefully Devin Hester this week. So
good old Devin Hester.
Some explosion could come back to the offense. Because even if Devin Hester isn't, going to catch the ball, it's still worth it to chuck it deep to him. It's still worth it to have him stretch the defense. Even if he can't catch it. I mean, Deshaun Jackson catches it maybe, 8 out of every 10 times when he gets his hands on the balls going deep. Just chuck it deep.
It would be nice to have another receiver on the field that can run faster than a 4.6.
Yeah. Well, Hardy runs a 4.5.
Okay. All right.
He's not burning any defenses, though. Not without really good routes. Just like Harry Douglas.
All right. I mean, look, okay. Hardy's got a 4.5. Great. Wonderful.
They
Awesome.
don't ever send him deep. Like, I just want to see them send him deep and just see Ryan throw it deep. Because just by having hey, Ryan's going to actually throw to someone that's not Julio deep, just by having that possibility out there, it creates something else for the defense.
That's kind of what Hankerson is, though.
That's what they did with Tevin Coleman. That's what they do with Devontae Freeman every now and again. They'll line him up out wide. They'll throw it deep to him. Even if it doesn't connect, it does open up the defense for later in the game. It doesn't have to connect. Just the threat of them going for a deep shot, and maybe they connect, and even if you don't score a touchdown, you still get a 30-yard chunk. Who cares? Like, that's the whole point of throwing deep. It's to stretch the defense out and create more room underneath.
Yeah. And if you do like the Bucks do, I guess the last time you throw deep, you pass interference. So, 3 yards.
Although a couple times that they did get pass interference calls on them, it was ridiculously just bad calls.
Now, talking a little bit more about some of the other positives from this game. I know, Charles, you pointed this out a little bit on Twitter with some vines. What are your thoughts on Grady Jarrett's development so far this year?
I think you can make a pretty strong case that he's been our most efficient rookie as far as making positive plays when he's in the game. I mean, for a 5th-round pick, he's definitely come in and exceeded expectations for his draft status. I always thought that at Clemson he was a really good player, a guy that you could take on day 2 and kind of expect him to be a solid contributor in the defensive line. So I'm not too surprised that he's playing well, but if you're going to come in as a 5th-round pick, it's just nice to see the flashes that you can be probably a future starter down the line. And, with Babineau getting up there in age, Grady Jarrett is kind of looking like he's going to be a guy who can fill in and maybe even be a Babineau level player in the future.
I agree. I think he's well on his way to being that sort of disruptor in the middle. And I've been impressed with him. The Week 3 game against the Cowboys, I think he only played like 7 snaps in that game. But when he faced guys like Zach Martin and when he faced guys like Travis Frederick in that game, he did his job. He beat those guys, and those are some of the best interior offensive linemen in the NFL. And so, I like the fact that we're seeing him getting more snaps as the season has progressed. I also like the fact that the Falcons aren't necessarily, throwing him out there every down and just sort of giving him confidence-boosting sort of snap counts. Like, he could play more, certainly. Don't get me wrong or anything. But I'm appreciative of the fact that, they're actually developing a guy as opposed to previous regime who was just basically, we got a rookie who's drafted high in the draft. He's a starter. Doesn't matter even if he's ready or not. And I like the fact that we're trying to develop some of these pass rushers and not trying to overwhelm them too much by getting them out there and saying, you got to play 40 snaps right away. And then being inconsistent for 33 of them and then having 7 positive ones.
I like that he's actually improving as a pass rusher. He wasn't a great pass rusher when he was in college, but he's really improved the past couple weeks, specifically with his hand usage. It's been fun to see. He's been throwing around some guards and some centers.
Yeah. Now, another player on defense I thought has been impressive in recent games, especially considering that he's new to the team, is Philip Wheeler. What are your guys' thoughts on sort of what positive impact?
Falcons' best linebacker right now. Well, I mean, I don't think Durant's been very good this season. And Warlow, Warlow's Warlow. He's not going to improve from where he's at. He is what he is. I think next year, I think he still starts next year just because they can't bring anybody in to replace him. Not because they don't want to replace him, but because they can't bring anybody in to replace him. And I don't think Durant comes back next year just because he's been injured all year, and I think he's been worse than Warlow. I mean, they've both been bad, but Warlow has some pass rush ability and playing the run better. But they've both been really bad. They've both been very replaceable.
I'm curious where Charles comes in on that because I don't quite agree, but
well, I do think that Wheeler's been the best linebacker since they've signed him, and but I would be surprised if Warlow is back starting next year because I think Philip Wheeler. I think the addition of Philip Wheeler has kind of showed how easy it would be to replace him. They just signed this dude off the streets like halfway through the season, and he's already the best linebacker. And Durant.
To be fair, it's not like Philip Wheeler is a horrible linebacker throughout his career. He had a bad year last year. He looked off. He's a 31-year-old linebacker who came in and went to a scheme that he knew and went to a scheme that he's been productive in a standard 4-3 scheme. They're just using him like a weak side linebacker in a standard 4-3 scheme where he's always been at his best.
Yeah, but I do think when Durant's been in the game, which is availability is one of the biggest underrated traits you can have. I do think when he's been in the game, he's been better than Warlow, but I think Philip Wheeler's been the best of the trio. But yeah, linebacker. If you're gonna sign Philip Wheeler off the street and you're plugging him in and he's automatically your best linebacker, that's not a very your linebacking core isn't obviously not doing too hot to begin with. So that's a major point of emphasis going into the offseason. Yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts. I'd be surprised if Warlow's back starting next year. I'm not sure about Durant. I haven't looked at his contract situation, but Wheeler's been good. The rest of the linebacker situation is kind of murky right now.
Yeah, I think I'm with Charles on the Warlow situation. I think it would be an absolute failure on this team if they don't upgrade Warlow this offseason. Like, I don't think it's going to be that hard to do. Like, if you can't come away from the free agency or the draft with a better option than Paul Warlow starting at middle linebacker, then
They've got to go.
Yeah.
Jack. That's the honest to God's truth. That'd be the perfect fit because you could use him at middle. You could throw him down on the line, have him rush the passer. You could use him everywhere. To me, if you don't get Miles Jack in the first, though, I don't see that instant starter because there's no way Reggie Ragland falls to the mid-teens or later. There's no way that
Jalen Smith.
Yeah, Smith. I don't see Smith falling to the mid-teens either. I see both those guys going top 15. And I do think the Falcons turn it around a little bit to at least have a winning record and not be picking before 15. So, I see him having a pick in that 18 to 23.
Yeah, but I mean, like...
I just don't see the linebackers being there at their pick.
Oh, but I mean, it doesn't have to be the draft. Like, in free agency, you can go sign literally anybody, and they'll be better than what we have. That's kind of where I stand with Paul Warlow.
Sign Danny Trevathan.
He's better than Warlow. I mean, anybody.
Danny Trevathan's a top 10 linebacker in the league.
Yeah.
He may not be considered that by a lot of people, but he is a top 10 linebacker in the league. You sign him, you put him in the middle, you use his connection to Richard Smith to try and lure him away. The fact that Atlanta doesn't get bitter-ass cold in the winter the way Denver does, and maybe you actually have something there.
Isn't Danny Trevathan from Georgia?
He went to Kentucky.
I know he went to Kentucky. I thought he was from Georgia.
He might be. No, it's from Youngstown, Ohio.
Okay, way off. I was way off. Sorry. I think with
Florida, according to Wikipedia.
Okay. I think with the linebacker situation, I think Durant will be back next year. I know the injuries have soured a lot of people on him, but we kind of knew when we signed him that he really hadn't been healthy ever. Now, you can certainly make the case that this was one of his most injury-prone years because he's been off and on, back and forth on the injured list. But I think his contract is not, off the top of my head, so bad where it's like even if he comes back and is a backup, the fact that he can play both middle and will linebacker, and you kind of know what he is, I think you bring it back. I think probably, assuming Wheeler keeps this up for the last 5 games, he'll probably be back. And I think you could probably go into next year, regardless of what you do in free agency, thinking, okay, let's move Durant to middle linebacker. Warlow can be his backup. Let's put Wheeler at the weak side linebacker. And I think whether you get a guy in the first round or not, I think, to me, if you're drafting a second-round middle linebacker, he should be better than Paul Warlow. Like, anybody that you take in the top 64 picks at linebacker should instantly be better. If he's not better than Paul Warlow, then he shouldn't be a second-round pick.
The question is whether he's more athletic than Warlow.
Warlow isn't athletic, though. I mean, like, the numbers say...
athletic linebackers coming out this year.
But, I mean, even with Warlow, it's not even being athletic. It's being able to do basic functional linebacker things, like stand up against the run and not get bullied by running backs that weight,
There's about 20 linebackers that are right in the same spot as Warlow right now. That's the unfortunate thing about the NFL. There's a lot of bad play everywhere.
I mean, Philly has 4 inside linebackers that are better than Warlow.
Yeah, they also all went in the first round or the second round, and they're all really fucking good.
Just kind of
Carolina has 3 linebackers better than Warlow.
That all went in the first round.
And then, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's just not hard to replace him. He's awful. Like when you, I don't know when you.
You just listed 2 of the best linebacking groups out there, though.
I mean, just think of any team, and you would say, okay, I take him over Warlow. I can't think of one team as a linebacker that I wouldn't take over Warlow?
New York Giants, Illini, Unga, Washington with Perry Riley, Oakland with Curtis Lofton, because Curtis Lofton got old and slow. Michael Wilhoit in San Francisco.
He's good. He's not bad.
He's basically Warlow, but you're saying he's not bad. That's what I'm saying. Like, a lot of these guys are basically the same guy as Warlow. Warlow sucks in coverage.
He sucks against the run, too.
Against the run.
I mean, so does Donald Butler. So does Lawrence Timmons. So does James Laurinaitis. So does Keenan Robinson. Quan Alexander hasn't exactly been great.
I would take Quan Alexander in a heartbeat.
He's got potential, and he's better in coverage. But there's a lot of times you're out there and you're watching Quan Alexander.
So he's got potential, and he's better in one facet. And Warlow's better than in nothing.
He's got experience. He knows the scheme.
It's the most basic scheme in the NFL.
It's tough to find guys where you're like, oh my god, every single linebacker in the leagues, every single player in the league is better than this guy. It's just not the case. Again, he's definitely replaceable, but it's not as easy to replace a starter that's at least average right now.
Okay.
It's not.
Okay.
I mean, look at how it worked with Dante Robinson.
Didn't we pretty easily replace him with Robert Alford?
Alford was pretty shitty his first year.
I don't think he was shittier than Dante Robinson.
As a rookie, he was.
Okay. I don't agree.
As a rookie, he was. As a rookie, Alford was pretty bad.
I think you might not remember how shitty Dante Robinson was. He was pretty bad. He's like one of the worst starting cornerbacks in the NFL. I think Alford kind of hit that at a minimum as a rookie. And I didn't even want Alford starting his second year, but I still think he was at least as good as Dante Robinson. All right, so I guess we should, stop talking about Paul Warlow and
move on to the next game.
Well, I guess we need to talk a little bit more about Matt Ryan, right? I know you guys watched a little bit of his performance, and I'm just curious, what is sort of your thoughts? I know, Charles, you were tweeting earlier, and I can't say the dude's name, Kean Fahey or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Was basically saying 80% good, 10% terrible. And Charles, you said that's perfect summary.
Yeah. My film article this week is charting I charted Matt Ryan's throws versus Minnesota. And, if you discount the garbage time where after Adrian Peterson had that 35-yard touchdown run and then the Falcons no huddle down the field to make it that meaningless touchdown to Nick Williams. If you take those first 24 throws up to there, the majority of them, it was pretty good football. But besides, like Kean said, you get 80% good football that you can win with, and then you get the 10% interception to Nick Williams that Captain Munnerlyn had over the middle, and then you get the interception to Tammy in the back of the end zone, and that 10% kind of just eliminates everything else he did. So, the Falcons right now, the passing offense it's an offense that can function between the 20s, but once we get down to the red zone, and like we've seen with the whole rest of the offense, it struggles. And I think the data that I got today from charting kind of resembles that. I mean, with Matt Ryan, a lot of people are concerned, and there's a lot of finger pointing going at Kyle Shanahan. They saying the world is ending, but I don't really think it's as bad as people are making it out to be. I think with Kyle Shanahan's offense, a lot of it is reliant on athletic receivers outside the number one, and with Hankerson out, there's nobody really to fill that void of somebody who can threaten the defense deep. Roddy's, he's not cutting it. They haven't really tried with Hardy, and Nick Williams is certainly not the answer. So I think once we see Kyle Shanahan kind of get his personnel and his players on offense through the draft and free agency, I do think that the passing game will clean up a little bit. Because we've seen earlier this year when Hankerson's in the lineup, you can kind of threaten the deep portion of the field. We saw versus Indianapolis, they were attacking the middle of the field. They were running a lot of mirrored post routes where you got Julio on one side, Hankerson on the other side, and they're both threatening vertically up the field. And the safety kind of has to pick who he's going to take because they're both approaching the field at the same pace. So we don't really have anybody like that with Hankerson out. I just think they're going to have to figure that out in the offseason. And 11 games into a new regime, you can't kill Kyle Shanahan for ruining Matt Ryan. It's still in there. It's just going to take a little bit of time, a little bit of personnel decisions to kind of bring it back out. I think next season he's going to be a lot better, but this season might be a wash.
I've been going through his interceptions today, and only 4 of them were really bad reads, and 4 of them were bad throws. So, 3 of them were just really good defensive plays, which you're going to see. Like that Kiko Alonso, ridiculous, I don't know how to explain it. He, jumped up and reached back and did a Odell Beckham-type catch. That's a ridiculous defensive play that you're not really accounting for. That tip that was the Dwight Lowery dive that I don't even think was really a catch, that was one of them. And then the one where it was the tip defensive ball, and then what was his name? Williamson from Tennessee had that pick. Those 3 were really good defensive plays. And then the Hail Mary. You can't really fault a quarterback for throwing an interception on the Hail Mary because it's a prayer. So outside of those 4 plays, you had 8 just bad plays from Ryan. And part of the bad reads is it's his first year in an offense. Those will get cleaned up throughout his time in the offense. We saw the same thing back when Cutter was first starting with the team. We saw the same thing back when he was a rookie. He had bad reads. Every quarterback goes through it their first year in an offense. So you just got to give them time to get through that. And fans are fickle, and they're not going to let them have time to get through a bad situation.
Yeah. If I was breaking it down, I would probably say the Williamson pick, the Walter Thurman pick in week 1, and the DeQuell Jackson pick 6 were 3 definite. I think those were bad decisions on Matt Ryan. He forced throws or didn't look off a guy. I think Charles thinks the Tammy pick or the Newman pick against the Vikings was a bad decision. I personally don't think it was a bad decision. I think it was just a horrible throw. And I think you can make a case for the Quan Alexander pick against the Bucs, where Tammy was kind of in triple coverage, but even though I think to a certain extent that was
a bad read.
When Ryan thought he was going to zag, Tammy broke outside after initially breaking inside, and Ryan threw inside, and which went right to the defender. But you can say that's a bad decision because he should have. It was a whatever. But I think other than that, most of his other interceptions, other than the ones that Scott also pointed out, are just bad throws. And bad throws, to a lesser extent, are forgivable because it happens to everybody. You miss some throws. Now, you can certainly make the case that I think Ryan has missed a lot more throws than he usually does this year, and I think that's a fair comment. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, we're probably counting on one hand or 2 hands maybe how many different plays it's really different from the last couple of years. And I think, as what Charles was saying, I think a lot of people are sort of freaking out about Ryan's huge regression when I think it's slight. It's 2%, 5%. Mm-hmm. It's down. He's having a down year, no doubt about it. Certainly, it's mainly because of the turnovers. He's got 15 turnovers already this year, and basically if he keeps that pace, he'll hit 20. I don't think he's ever had more than 15 in an entire year.
And ideally, he just quits turning the ball over or cuts it down to one or two more for the rest of the season, and the Falcons start winning games. And ideally, they don't give the ball to Tevin Coleman, so Coleman can't just continue to screw shit up.
I'm not as down on Tevin Coleman as you guys are, but whatever.
The man can't catch, and the man can't hold on to the ball.
That's a fair statement based off what he's done so far this year, but I think, he's going through the same sort of struggles that a lot of rookies are going through, so I'm not too worried about it. I think we kind of knew.
Ball like this when you're going into traffic. Every fumble he has, he's going like this. He's got a guy right in front of him. He just needs to wrap up the ball. All three of his fumbles could have been prevented if he just wrapped up the damn ball.
You can say the same thing about Adrian Peterson. It's like 37 fumbles.
Yeah, but Coleman's not Adrian Peterson. He's just not.
I know. I'm just saying, it happens.
Yeah. I think the thing with Coleman is more of a play calling groove with Kyle Shanahan, and when Devonta gets back, kind of figuring out. It's kind of like gelling the offensive line, Devonta, Shanahan, Coleman, all getting on the same page together, because I think we earlier in the first game of the season, Coleman was kind of working his way outside on those outside zone plays, and we kind of thought that Coleman's going to be the outside zone guy, Devonta's going to be the inside zone guy, and that's how they're going to run the offense. And then since Coleman's been back from his injury, those outside zone plays, they haven't been as good as they were the first week. He's getting caught on the edge between the tackle and the guard, and the tackle and tight end, and he's not seeing the cutback or the bounce or the bounce quick enough, and he just kind of gets stuffed at the line of scrimmage. But versus Minnesota, they kind of ran more of a man or gap blocking scheme, more double teams, more down blocks, back blocks, and that's kind of up his alley, where he can just hit the hole, and then once he gets into the second level, he's got that 4.3 speed, and he's right near the line, the first down marker most times. So I think this Sunday we definitely saw potential with Coleman. It's just gonna have to be Shanny saying, okay, these are the plays that work with Devonta, and then these are the plays that work with Coleman. And I think once they figure that out and they both kind of get healthy and they both get together back in the swing of things, I think the Falcons are really going to be able to lean on that running attack to win at least one or two games down the stretch.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to what Coleman not necessarily does this year, but what he does next year, because I think what's going to really happen for him is he's basically, going to have to hit it hard in the offseason, because as pretty much everybody kind of at this point, it's Devonta Freeman's job, and most people have pretty much written off Tevin Coleman as being anything more than a change of pace running back. And everything I've ever heard about Tevin Coleman suggests that that's not going to sit particularly well with him. And I think, adjusting to a zone blocking scheme, which he didn't really play a lot in they did run some plays that were outside zone-like, but they weren't really zone blocking in the sense of where often, it's not going to mesh immediately with every player. Most players get the zone blocking scheme because it's to a certain extent, simple. But, I think with Coleman, it's going to take some time for him to grow. So I'm not too worried about it. If Coleman is struggling next year, then I'll start to be concerned about him. But I'm not going to be concerned about a guy 70 carries into their NFL career when we've seen flashes of ability. Yeah.
A 3.5 yard guy plus big plays every now and again, where Devontae is going to be more of that standard 4 or 5 yard chunk guy through their career, especially in this scheme.
That's probably fair. I think that's probably a realistic aspect of it. I think Devontae's probably a little bit better at creating his own, just because he has better lateral agility and probably has better vision. And so you can see him get out of plays, that negative plays, more easily than Coleman can, and add 1 or 2 yards per run to make him a little bit more effective. But I do think that big play element is going to be something, if Coleman can refine it and start to be a little bit more consistent down in and down out. I think that big play element is going to be something where maybe not next year, but maybe around 2017 when Devontae will be in a contract year. I think Coleman could make it interesting, and there may be a conversation after that year, maybe, that maybe we can hand the keys to Tevin Coleman and not pay Devontae Freeman the gobs and gobs of money that he'll get on the open market. But we'll see. That's 3 years from now, so we'll figure it out.
Yeah. I think for right now, though, the idea that Freeman is the primary back and you have Coleman come in and hope you get a couple big plays out of Coleman and, finish the year, Devontae has at least 1,000 yards on the ground and Coleman finishes with like 500, 600. That's a lot better running game than any of us were expecting heading into the year.
Definitely.
Especially you, Aaron, because you thought that we weren't going to have a single 1,000-yard rusher. You didn't think that we were even going to see a 1,200-yard rushing season. And the Falcons actually have a really good run game for once. Whether it's Devontae or Tevin running the ball, they're at least moving the ball. Even if it's junk yardage, it's volume yardage, they're at least moving it. They're at least committing to the run, which more than we could say for Cutter.
They have a certain degree of balance. I don't think they have quite the sort of dominant running game on a week-in, week-out basis where they can basically run the football and win football games that way, like, say, a team like Seattle has had.
Or Minnesota, like we saw on Sunday.
Yeah, but we've seen like, I think the Dallas game is a real good example of when our running game is at its peak. The second half of that game where Devontae was just carving up the Cowboys. And we've seen flashes of that. It's not to say that we can't get there, but I think we're going to need some changes on the offensive line before we can really expect to get to that level. But I'm sure we'll talk about that a little later in the show. Let's talk about this upcoming game against the Buccaneers. Now, the fortunate thing about the Falcons' last game against the Buccaneers is they were pretty injury depleted. They didn't have Vincent Jackson. They didn't have Austin Seferian-Jenkins. I think there was a couple of other injuries that they didn't have. Jackson is back. I haven't heard any updates on whether Seferian-Jenkins will be back. He didn't play last week, and he's basically – I think he got cleared to practice like a month ago, but he still hasn't played yet. So maybe this is the week that he plays, and everybody knows the Falcons are terrible against tight ends. So that won't be a good thing for the defense.
They're missing Ali Marpet, though, and Evan Smith is horrible. Evan Smith can't pass block for a damn. So we could see Babineau, we could see Jarrett put him on skates all day.
Yeah, and then I hear that Quan Alexander might get suspended at some point. I don't know if it's going to happen this week or next week, but I'm assuming that he's been able to. I think he already got suspended and now he's appealing, and so I don't know the situation. I have too much Falcon stuff on my brain to pay attention to what the Bucs are doing. But yeah, it's one of those things where if the Falcons couldn't beat the Bucs with sort of some of these injured players out of the lineup, what are you guys' thoughts on some of these guys coming back and whether it's going to swing things further to the Bucs' favor or the Falcons are going to be able to get things back on track and win the game that they should have won last time?
Well, I mean, for me, I think this game it really comes down to one player, and it's come down to one player for the entire Bucs season. It's Jameis Winston. If he plays well, then they're going to win, and that's just kind of been how their whole season has gone. We saw not this past Sunday. He didn't play well versus the Colts. They lost. He goes out versus Philly, throws 5 touchdowns. They win. Even when
the Falcons in
the
first game.
Yeah, he played well versus the Falcons in the first game.
The Falcons almost still won. The issue was that the Falcons pissed the game away. Not that the Bucs really won it. The Falcons pissed the game away with the 3 turnovers and not creating any of their own.
He's still making enough big-time throws where you're keeping the opposing offense off the field. And, if he gets into a groove and he throws 2 touchdowns and avoids the turnovers, I mean, it's hard for me to be confident that this team can go on the road and win a game, even against the Bucks. And I mean, the Bucks, they're only a game behind the Falcons right now. So this is really a big game with playoff implications, with NFC South implications, and I think if Winston gets into a groove, it's going to be tough for them to win. And based on what we saw last week against Adrian Peterson, I'm definitely not saying Doug Martin is Adrian Peterson, but if he can make things a little bit easier on the rookie quarterback and get a key first down or two, rip off, maybe 1 or 2 8 to 10-yard runs, it's going to be a tough out for the Falcons. And the red zone offense for Atlanta has got to cut down on these sloppy turnovers, because I don't know how many times you can get within 20 yards of the end zone and come away with nothing. It's honestly been a little bit weird. And I remember last time versus the Buccaneers, we had the fumble on the handoff, which is just bizarre, and then they had the interception in the red zone. I don't know. Something's eventually got to break with that. Maybe this is the week, but if not, it's just tough for me to see them winning this game.
I mean, how often can you get into the red zone and not score a touchdown? Yeah, I agree. Something's got to give. Like, I don't know. Let's target Julio Jones for once in the red zone. Like, even if he's triple covered, just throw the ball to him. Maybe he'll catch it. It's Julio Jones.
Maybe. Yeah, he is Julio Jones. Maybe he will catch it. The interesting thing about this Bucs matchup to me is, to me, one of the bigger problems of the Falcons offense is their inability to get those vertical plays. And without the chunk yardage, when you're turning, basically what ends up happening with the Falcons in all these losses, in all these games where their offense struggles to score points, is they're not getting chunk yardage, and when they do get chunk yardage, then they turn the ball over, right? We saw that Tevin Coleman's fumble perfectly sums that up. Great play by Tevin Coleman, blows it. That was perfect prime time scoring position that the Falcons were in when he fumbled the ball. And then we moved the ball down the field, a lot thanks to Tevin Coleman. He scores on the touchdown, he gets called back, and then Matt Ryan throws a pick. And the issue I think the Falcons are going to have to face with the Bucs is, even though the Bucs secondary isn't very good, they've been really good about not giving up big plays this year. I think they've given up the least amount of 20-yard plays in the air of any team this season, like even less than the Panthers. And that was one of the big takeaways I had from the last game, where the Falcons really couldn't get any chunk yardage. I don't think they threw the ball down the field more than one time that game. And, you can say that's certainly, the benefit of the cover two is it limits those sort of opportunities, and unless you can attack the middle of the field with your tight end or a slot receiver, and Jacob Tamme did have one of his best games. I think it was probably his career best game against the Buccaneers last time. But if we're basically going to be stuck in a situation where we have to rely on Jacob Tamme to carry the offense, that's not a good look for the Falcons. And it's really going to boil down to, can we get into a situation early enough in the game where we can control and dictate the outcome of the game, and we can get Jameis Winston into a situation where he's pressing, which he really wasn't last time. Like, I don't think Jameis Winston played a great game against the Falcons. I think he missed a lot of throws, and I think if he had made some of those throws, the Bucs would have blown us out probably by like 20 or 30 points. So I can't necessarily say, but I don't think the Falcons ever really made Jameis Winston uncomfortable. And I think what we need to see from this Falcon team is we need to be able to get some chunk plays against the Bucs defense that usually doesn't give it. We need to be able to run the ball, and we need to be able to make Jameis Winston uncomfortable, and that's going to depend on this pass rush that has flashed ability at times, but they're getting the perfect opportunity. We played the Vikings. That was a bad offensive line. Unfortunately, because of Adrian Peterson, the Vikings never really got into any sort of unfavorable passing situations. We need to get the Bucs into those this week and really expose their offensive line and make it look like the offensive line that I think, the poor offensive line that most of us projected them to have this year. And the Falcons can't do that, then they don't really deserve to win the game. And that's ultimately the problem, I think, has been the case over the last 6 or 7 games, where too many of our opponents have been comfortable and been able to do what they want to do and put the Falcons in a situation where they have to sort of adjust. And it's really about dictating the pace of the game. And I don't think the Falcons have done that, and I think that's going to be really important this week. So yeah.
All right.
Let's do mailbag. Oh no, let's talk about worst Thomas Dimitroff contracts.
Yeah, when Parsons was talking about this on Twitter the other day as as Matt Ryan as Dimitroff's worst contract, I laughed about it, and then I thought about it today, and then I just saw this list, and it's just not even close. It's not even close to the worst one.
It's not a bad contract.
Not yet.
Well, for a franchise quarterback, yeah, he's having a couple struggles right now, but for a franchise quarterback, it's built like a franchise quarterback's contract where you build the team around him, not the other way around. The Falcons still have a shit ton of cap room. There's not an issue with that.
Yeah. Okay, for me, it's a tie between Dunta Robinson in 2010 getting 6 years, $55 million,
Yes.
$22 million guaranteed, and then the Ray Edwards signing in 2011, 5 years, $27.5 million, $11 million guaranteed. I'm gonna go with Ray Edwards just because I thought that he and Abraham could kind of get a little chemistry going on the pass rush, and then Edwards just came in and dropped a huge dump and didn't do absolutely anything. And then because I remember that was back when I didn't like write or anything, but I saw like Edwards getting 8 sacks across from Jared Allen in Minnesota, and then they just signed him for what seemed to be like a premium pass rusher for like pennies. And I thought it was a great deal, and he just didn't do anything. So that's definitely the most disappointing Dimitroff signing for me.
Yeah, the day he signed, you were like, how did they get him that cheap? That was a pretty good deal.
It's like, he sucks.
Well, then you realize he doesn't love he just loved being an underwear model, and that's what made him suck.
Yeah, that deal looked great compared to what the Panthers had given Charles Johnson at the time. Everybody was like laughing at the Panthers for giving Charles Johnson like $60 million or something like that.
I would have gladly given Charles Johnson that to say that.
Hindsight clearly shows that the Falcons overpaid Ray Edwards and the Panthers probably underpaid Charles Johnson. So
I bet you that the Falcons have offered him a deal very similar to that, and that's why he went to the Panthers.
now, for me, the worst contract is it's the Sam Baker contract. This is terrible, terrible contract. Like, you give a guy that's had one good season in 5 years, maybe 1.5 if you want to count the half of his rookie season where he was decent when he was splitting carries with Todd Weiner. And you can say 1.5 good years, and even the good year, the 2012 season, he was just an average starter. But because the rest of the offensive line was so bad that year, he looked good in comparison. And you give that guy who's basically 2 years before that, you basically saw with Will Svitek, who was a journeyman camp body on your team, outplay him, and you're going to give that guy 6 years, $41 million with $18.5 million guaranteed. That's got to be the most idiotic contract I've ever heard of. It's just like, what were you like?
Like, a lot of these contracts aren't that bad. Like, the Thomas Deku contract wasn't that bad because the 3 years or the 2 years they had him, he was super cheap. And he got all that guaranteed money of $4 million guaranteed and made a Pro Bowl. Like, that wasn't that bad. The Nicholas one wasn't that bad because he got almost all that guaranteed money those first 2 years, and he was fine. And he played, 3 out of 5 years? But that Sam Baker contract was fucking horrible. That's the worst by far of the Dimitroff contracts.
Yeah, because I mean, at least with the Dunta Robinson contract, you can justify the logic behind it, I guess. You know, he was good in Houston. We need a corner, so we're gonna have to overpay for this guy a little bit. But the Baker contract just made no sense at any point in time.
And for Dunta Robinson, all that guaranteed money, was paid in 2010 because it was an uncapped year.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So the $22.5 million was all paid in 2010 during the uncapped year. He could have been cut at any time for no issue. It was the restructure that sucked.
Now, a couple of runners-up on bad contracts. The Paul Soliai deal. Paul Soliai's been decent this year, but you don't pay $33 million for a 30-year-old two-down nose tackle. That just doesn't make any sense. I get why the Falcons paid him because they were paying him for what he had done, not to what he was going to do. But Roddy White basically fell off of a cliff right after we paid him, which was like a 3-year extension for $23 million with $8 million guaranteed. And it is what it is. I'm looking at some of these other moves. Now, look, I love Stephen Nicholas, but that deal was not a smart deal because we had just drafted Akeem Dent, and it didn't make any sense to why you're going to pay Nicholas that sort of money, starting linebacker money, when you just drafted his replacement.
Because you drafted the replacement for not him, but for Curtis Lawson.
Well, if they drafted Akeem Dent to replace Curtis Lawson, then that just makes that pick even worse because
that's what they did.
This is terrible.
I tell you what, though, that Brooks Reed contract, 2 years down the line, we're going to be looking back at that and being like, what were you doing, man?
It's not that bad the way it's structured. Because it's really easy to get out. Think the Thomas Deku contract.
Yeah, it's structured in a similar way as the Deku contract, with basically two relatively cheap years, and then he's gone.
Basically.
And really, the reality of pretty much every free agent contract, especially the ones that are 5 or more years, they're pretty much all structured where the guy's going to be gone after no later than the third year. And that's one of the issues with free agency and why you can't really overpay in free agency. You got to give respect to the Dan Quinn staff, with the exception of the Brooks Reed deal, where they didn't really overpay for anybody. Because you go back and you look at free agency, and pretty much every big contract, with a few exceptions like Charles Woodson a couple of years ago when the Packers paid him, he played out the entirety of like a 6-year contract. And a couple of other guys, but pretty much everybody else gets a big deal.
Woodson was 4 Pro Bowls on that contract too. That was
yeah. You could make an argument that Charles Woodson's deal in Green Bay is probably one of the 10 or 5 best free agent signings in NFL history. But that's a rare occurrence, And most guys they get paid, and then 2 or 3 years later they're moving on. Or if you're the Buccaneers, 1 year later, you're getting out of that contract. And unfortunately, the problem that when Dimitroff and Mike Smith were here was the Falcons were putting themselves in situations where they couldn't get out of the contract soon enough. When they guaranteed Baker $18.5 million guarantee, they basically were saddled with him and then basically had to dump him this offseason, and they got nothing for the 2 years out of him. And it's the same thing with Soliai, and it's kind of the same way with Jackson. 2 years in, one of those guys is probably going to be gone next year. And you're basically like, okay, we got league average starting production from them. They're not bad or anything, but it's just like, was it worth the $25 million in guaranteed money that you gave them over the last 2 years? Probably not. So,
you know what's great? The Falcons have paid a combined $5.7 million to Corey Bierman, Adrian Claiborne, and O'Brien Schofield this year, and I've gotten more production out of those 3 guys than they ever got from Ray Edwards.
Yeah,
that's what's sad.
Awesome contracts, guys. All right, let's. You guys got anything else to say about the contracts before we move on to the mailbag?
Nope.
All right. First question comes from Jesse Lalamindra. Who are you more disappointed with over the last 6 weeks, Ryan or Shanahan? Ryan's play or Shanahan's play calling?
I mean, Ryan. Shanahan's play calling hasn't been awful. I'm probably one of the Team Shanahan defenders right now. And, I mean, he's calling a standard West Coast scheme the way you're supposed to call a standard West Coast scheme. Do I wish he'd call more ISO plays toward Julio? Do I wish he'd call a couple more screens for the running backs? It'd be nice, but, I mean, you're looking at nitpicking stuff, not big concepts within the game. Shanahan's the reason why the Falcons even have a running game right now.
Yeah, it's easy for me, Ryan. You know, a lot of people are just saying like it's the scheme that's causing Ryan to play bad. No scheme is if you can't hit a basic 5 to 10 yard out to the far sideline. That's not scheme. That's just you. That's just you not executing up to the standards of the average NFL quarterback. And the scheme isn't forcing you to throw in triple coverage to Julio versus San Francisco and getting him killed out there. The scheme isn't forcing you to roll out and throw across your body to Tammy in the end zone for an interception. Ryan's just got to clean up the play. I think the play calling's been fine. He's totally revamped the offensive line to make it a top 15 unit in the league. It's not Shanahan. It's Ryan's just got to get more comfortable in the scheme, I guess, get some more weapons around him. Because, I think we've seen the past 2 years since they started losing, Ryan's not the guy where you go out and say, all right, here's one good guy and 5 scrubs, go out and win the game. He's just not that guy. You're going to have to put some more talent around him. And until they do that, it's more on Ryan to hit these easy throws. But the Falcons' offense in general, I mean, especially the passing game, is a mess. And a lot of it stemmed from personnel. I don't want to blame either side too much because I don't think Ryan has been as bad as we're making him out to be. He's just regressed slightly from what he was last year. And it's just going to take some time to get to gel and piece offense together.
He's going from a 4 verticals, like basically old school passing style, Coryell style scheme to a West Coast offense. When you're going from that Gilman style to that West Coast offense, it's a huge difference. Terminology, they didn't keep the same terminology they were using before. So he's had to actually learn the scheme. West Coast offenses take 2 to 3 years to really learn. Like, I think Ryan can do it in about 2 years, but we're in, 11 games into the first year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think you got to point more fingers at Ryan, but again, I'm one of those people that doesn't think. I think people are making Ryan out to be worse than what he is, as Charles said. I think there is fair criticism towards Shanahan, but I think people are taking it a little too far when they're talking about firing him. I think that there are some nitpicky stuff, but I'm not going to nitpick a guy 11 games into his time, especially when this team really has thrown Band-Aid solutions at a lot of their positions on offense, right? We can sit here and say, we know Julio's good. We know the running backs are certainly better than certainly I expected them, but I think better than most people expected them. But you look at the rest of the offensive lineup outside of Ryan, the wide receiver group was basically ignored by the previous regime for about 5 years. They drafted 2 receivers in 5 years when the league average over that span was 6. So they drafted, 33% or 66% less than the league average. And so now they throw a Band-Aid solution with Hankerson and Hardy at that, sort of to just kind of get through. And then the same thing with tight end. Everybody knows they punted on the tight end position for 5 years. Basically, they just threw a bunch of third-string tight ends as replacements for Tony Gonzalez, and that didn't work out. And Tammy's a Band-Aid solution. We know what they did with the offensive line, where they kind of just threw it together at the beginning of the season. And I think that you can make a legitimate complaint about Shanahan and sort of insisting his scheme and sort of throwing Hawley out and putting in Mike Person. I think that's probably the most valid criticism you can give Shanahan this year. The whole talk of him not using enough no huddle, like, who cares? Like, I know Matt Ryan's better in no huddle, but I don't think the Falcons are in it necessarily to sort of, we got to get the most out of Matt Ryan right now because our goal is to win the Super Bowl right away. I think they're trying to get him to get comfortable in the scheme, and I think you got to give people time to sort of get their pieces in place. And like all the nitpicky stuff about Shanahan's play calling in the red zone and throwing it to Julio and not losing Toilolo, like I'll start to get more upset about that if we're in 2016 and 2017 and he's still not doing those things. But right now I'm like I'm not expecting him to, build Rome in a day. So I can be patient, and I think with Ryan's play he's having a down year, but I think people are way too quick to pull the plug on him as a viable starter just because he's having a bad year in his seventh year in the NFL, like pretty much every non-Hall of Fame quarterback has ever had, including some Hall of Fame guys. It happens, and people are way too quick to go to panic mode, and we have to completely reshuffle, the team and whatnot. So I think people need to pump the brakes and chill out.
The one thing I'm going to say about the no huddle, quarterbacks that can no huddle effectively can do it because they've been in the same offense for multiple years. When the Falcons go into their no huddle, they basically go back to the offense that they were in last year. And that's why Ryan's so effective and so quick. When they get out of the no huddle and they're doing the basic offense, they're doing the same West Coast stuff that they're supposed to be doing. So it's going to take a while before he's really effective in a no huddle in the current offense, and they can run it more often than what they've been doing. And before he can start making those, the one thing that I wish they would just give him is those 7-8 calls based on the box. If there's 7 guys in the box, go to a run. If there's 8 guys in the box, go to a pass. You don't even have to have a kill sign. You guys should just know if there's 8 in the box, this is the play. If there's 7 in the box, this is the play. And once the whole offense gets on the same page with that, they'll be able to do it.
All right, our next question comes from Agent J. He asks, of our last 4 losses, which one to you guys should have been a win? He says all 4 were winnable in his opinion.
I think they should have been on a 4-game win streak from Tampa Bay, San Francisco, Tennessee, and Indianapolis. I mean, they all should have been. There's no reason to lose that Indianapolis game when you're up 21 to what? 7 at one point? There's no reason to lose to San Francisco when you're on the goal line, you're down by 4, and then you kick a field goal. And then Tampa Bay, you just piss the game away with turnovers.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely the San Fran game. I mean, you're on the goal line down 4 points with like 2 minutes left. That to kick the field goal there was just disgustingly egregious, and I think that SB Nation came out with an article that said the Falcons would have been better off missing that field goal and pinning the 49ers on the goal line instead of making it. That's how bad of a decision it was. That was the one they should have won, definitely. It was. I'm still not over that field goal, the decision to kick a field goal in that situation.
I don't know why Ryan didn't just look at Devontae on 3rd down and go, hey, we haven't been running it great all day, but we're going to do a quick draw. No one else needs to know this but us. Like, hey, look, there's 5 in the box. We got 5 blockers. Draw play. And then gone in and blocked himself if one of the guys screwed up.
I was going to pick the 49er game, but just to be different, I'll pick the Colts game just because of the 4 losses. That was probably the best played game that we had. And I feel like if you play a pretty decent game, you should probably win. So I'll say the Colts game.
Was that your well-played loss?
Compared to some of these other losses, yeah, I would say that was a well-played loss.
Yeah, because I think with that Colts game, you could make an argument that was Matt Ryan's best game of the season. You could. I mean, the Lowry pick should have been called back. You go back and watch that goal line pick, it kind of looked like he and Tevin just weren't on the same page coming out of the backfield. because it looked like Tevin went right, and Matt was anticipating him to go left, and they were just kind of miscommunication, and that was awful. And then the last pick was a Hail Mary, which is irrelevant. But yeah, all four awful losses.
All right. Big boy Brewski, he asks, I'm ready for you guys tonight. I need some therapy. Can we turn this around?
Yes. The Falcons haven't been blown out by anybody this year. It's not like last year where they were just getting destroyed and they weren't in any game and they were just getting demolished. Like the Minnesota game, they had a shot. The New Orleans game, they had a shot. They've been in every single game this year. They haven't been just blown out 48-0 yet. I mean, we're probably going to see that in one of the Carolina games, but I do think they win one of the Carolina games because the division's going to be locked up. They're going to start playing backups. They're going to get a little cocky and be like, we're 14-0. And then Atlanta wins and uses that for a playoff boost. I mean, I realistically see a 4-1 finish for the Falcons. Assuming that Carolina basically is like, oh, we got the number 1 seed locked up. Peace. We're good.
Yeah, I don't see us beating Carolina. I don't think there's going to ever be a day where Carolina is going to lay down for the Falcons ever. I think we're their biggest rival. Even though we consider the Saints to be our biggest rival, I think Carolina considers the Falcons to be their biggest rival.
Which is why the Falcons don't care.
Which is probably why they won't win the game. But I think Bruce, if you're asking, can we turn it around, meaning we can finish 3-2? Sure. Are they gonna, like? If you're asking me, would I bet on the Falcons finishing 3-2? I wouldn't, just because they've had one good game in 8 weeks, and I don't think that means they're gonna have 3 good games in 5 weeks. I think they'll probably get 2 wins, finish 8-8. And that'll be it, and they'll be out of playoffs. But I hate to piss on your dreams, but that's kind of how I feel at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see it turning around to the point where they get a playoff spot. I mean, when was the last time they played good football? Week 4 versus Houston. It's a long time to just kind of snap back into it. I don't see it happening. I do think they go 2-3, they beat the Jaguars and then win one of these divisional games. But I mean, besides that, finish 8-8 and head into the offseason with a good foundation for next year. That's kind of how I see it playing out.
I mean, I'm the eternal optimist. I think they could go 5-0 because I've got faith, but I'm probably the only one here that does.
You're right. Technically, they could go 5-0.
It's 5-0. They're not that bad of a team to where they should have lost 4 in a row.
Yep. I could be president of the United States one day too. So.
Well, I'm just putting it this way: the New York Giants back in 2011 lost 4 games in a row and still won the Super Bowl. They had a stretch where they lost 5 out of 6 games and they still won the Super Bowl. Now, I don't think this Falcons team is that good.
Okay, that was my comeback.
But I do think that they could come back and make the playoffs.
I hope so, but I'm not expecting it.
I'm not saying this is a Super Bowl winning team, but this is a team that can get to the playoffs and maybe win a wild card game.
Okay.
Play the Redskins.
Okay. All right. Evan Birchfield asks, well, I guess we just answered this question. Will we make the playoffs? I guess this is a one-word answer.
No.
I say yes.
No.
I say squeak in as a 6 seed, but I still say yes. But I'm an optimist.
Okay. All right. Now we got some off-season talk. This is the new part where Charles drools over. We got AD Jumpman. He asks, what are your top 5 targets in free agency, and what are your top 3 picks in the draft?
Well, let me talk about the draft while I look up these free agent names. So the top 3 picks in the draft. So if we're just going to buy the, I guess first, second, third round, Miles Jack in the first round. You know, my buddy Eric Stoner, he's like the king of linebacker evals, and he's compared Miles Jack to Bobby Wagner. So if you can get that kind of athletic presence who can cover the field and be a force against the run, just stick him in there, and you got a guy who can be like a cornerstone of your defense for the next, 8 to 10 years. On offense in the second round, I'd like a receiver. I doubt Corey Coleman falls that far, but we've seen his play kind of slip as of late, and I do think that teams could overthink his production in Baylor's, up-tempo spread offense, and kind of just say, he's producing because they're running 4 verts all the time in screens, but he's got some nuance to his game, and he's really athletic, and he's kind of that perfect number 2 to stick across from Julio, have him bush stretch the field, and pray that he's going to stay more healthy than Hankerson has. He's got more consistent hands. He would be a perfect fit across from Julio and Kyle Shanahan's offense. And then in round 3, I think this is where the Falcons have a chance to take a gamble, and I will go with Noah Spence from Eastern Kentucky University. He was at Ohio State until he got kicked out with drug issues, but he's a first-round pick based on talent alone. He's just going to have to answer some of these questions off the field, and that's really If he's not in trouble at all, he's a top 10 pick. So if you can get him, mid-third round, or maybe even, I don't know, they can't trade up this year, but if you can get him mid-third round, that's an absolute steal, and you stick him across from Vic Beasley and just let him pin the ears back. Let him pin the ears back and go get the passer.
If you're asking me, I'm with Charles in the first round. Miles Jack or bust. I hope that the Falcons can actually get Miles Jack, and I hope that he falls for whatever reason due to that knee injury, so that the Falcons can get him. The second round, I want a wide receiver. If you can get Mike Williams out of Clemson and he falls that far because of that neck injury, bring him in. He's a big guy. He can run routes. He's physical. He had an insane neck injury that doesn't happen 9 times out of 10. And then in the third round, I'm with it. I'm with Charles again. Take a chance on someone. Only I'm more of a take a chance on a guard, take a chance on a tackle. I haven't scouted offensive line super heavy yet, but I like the idea of finding an athletic but kind of short tackle and moving him to guard. The whole Zach Martin theory. And just using that and running the zone scheme and profiting, basically. As far as players to sign, Josh Gordon's supposed to be a free agent. If we're talking about taking chances, that's one. Bruce Irvin's supposed to be a free agent. If you can get him, you get him, and you cut Brooks Reed, and you never look back. Olivier Vernon out of Miami, he would be a lot of fun across from Vic. Play Vic on the left, play Vernon on the right, and have a good pass rush. If you want a guy who can be that true strong side defensive end and defensive tackle at the same time, that Michael Bennett role, you go out and you get Malik Jackson out of Denver. Danny Trevathan, if Danny Trevathan cost what Bruce Irvin is going to cost, get him. He changes the defense completely. I'd love to see Brandon Boykin come in as a slot corner, but he's too short for what they like. If you can somehow get Alshon Jeffrey, there's a lot of really good players. Travis Benjamin. If Alshon Jeffrey is let go by the Chicago Bears and the Falcons don't go after him, they're stupid. Because he's going to Carolina if he doesn't come here.
Yeah, I'm just going to name 2 free agents. Go get Malik Jackson from Denver. Just an absolute stud. One of the two guys coming out of Denver, either Malik Jackson or Derek Wolfe, both can play defensive tackle, strong side defensive end. They're both really dynamic players. Get them to Atlanta, and then if they could try to bring in uh, I'm going to butcher this name, but Kelechi Osmele from Baltimore, the guard. They, they just gave big money to Marshall Yondas. I don't know if they're going to give him big money too, but he's an absolute stud who thrived in his own blocking scheme last year under Gary Kubiak, and he's big enough to run these gap schemes that they want to when they want to mix it up from time to time. So Malik Jackson, Derek Wolfe, Osmele, bring him to Atlanta.
Melly should have been the pick over Peter Kahns. And the aggravating thing is I said it that day.
You could say pretty much any name and say it should have been a pick over Peter Kahns. But
yeah, but no one else said it that day.
My draft thoughts are similar to you guys. I'm on the Miles Jack bandwagon. I'm hoping that, basically that knee, people get scared away from that knee and he falls in the draft. But I feel like he's going to be I feel like the way it's going to break for the Falcons are going to be picking like 18th, and he's going to get drafted like 14th or something like that, and it's going to completely screw us over. But if we have to move up a couple of spots to get him, then I'm all for it. Second round, I think I'd like to get the next best defensive stud, whether that's a safety, whether that's a defensive lineman. I just want to get two really strong foundational pieces on the defense to really help, really solidify that group for many, many years to come. If you don't get the Miles Jack sort of linebacker in the first round, then you get that guy in the second round. Third round, I'm sort of in the same camp as Scott. You're looking for that undersized left tackle that you can slide inside and play guard in the zone scheme. A couple of guys I have my eye on, but we'll have to see because it's really going to be important with Kyle Shanahan's sort of outside and zone scheme how well they test athletically. I think that's one of the reasons why we didn't draft a interior guy this year because there weren't that many options that really had the sort of athletic skill set that Shanahan's looking for. So, these guys might wind up running like a 5.4 or something like that, and that'll take him off. But the one guy I'm looking at that kind of fits that bill is Cody Whitehair from Kansas State. It looks like he has enough athleticism to run the outside zone scheme, but we'll see how that goes. If I'm looking at top 5 free agents, if Alex Mack opts out of his contract, and everything seems to suggest that he will, I think you go out and get him. You plug him in at center for the next 3 years, and you hope that by then Mike Person or James Stone is ready, or you find you've drafted a center by then that can replace him come 2018 or 2019 or whatever. I'm hoping that Deshaun Jackson punches Jay Gruden in the face between now and the end of the season so he can get released and come to Atlanta. Travis Benjamin is another guy. I think I don't think Travis Benjamin is going to be the sort of ideal number 2 receiver in this offense, but I think he does have that field stretching ability that Charles talked about earlier on the show that this offense kind of needs, a guy that can sort of exploit those one-on-one matchups. I'm on the Malik Jackson bandwagon. I agree with Charles. If you can't get Malik Jackson, then you get Derek Wolfe. Who was the other guy? Oh, tight end Ladarius Green. Get the guy from San Diego. He's been good when he's had the opportunity to play, but it's never really sort of shined in San Diego. I think he'd come to Atlanta. I really wanted us to get him back in 2013 or whenever it was, but it didn't work out. So, those would be my 5 free agents.
I still think Josh Gordon, get him to get his head out of his ass. You might actually have something.
I don't think Josh Gordon's a free agent, though, this year. Because the suspension, I think, defers him to 2017.
I thought they cut him.
Okay. Maybe. Yeah, I've been pushing for us to get Josh Gordon since 2013, so if he's available, then you can go out and get him. Okay. Andrew Scheiwaller asks, I guess this is more of a question for Aaron, as I have seen him talk about it more than Scott, but if you feel that this is a 3 to 4 year rebuild for the Falcons to truly win a Super Bowl, then why not trade Ryan to get more picks? I'm not saying I want to, just wondering.
Franchise quarterbacks aren't easy to find. It's why there's still 12 teams in the NFL without one. That's why you don't trade around Matt Ryan.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to take on Matt Ryan's contract either. It's not like it's horrible or anything, but we're kind of seeing that teams are opting for the pay-as-you-go thing. We see with Cap, Dalton. I mean, the Falcons can't move him because you can't take Matt Ryan out as much as he's struggling and just say, all right, well, now we don't have a quarterback anymore. You can't just give him up. No, I mean, realistically, no amount of picks you're going to get is going to offset the loss of just giving away a top 15 quarterback. So you got to keep him to figure it out.
Yeah, I think Andrew was referring to something I wrote either last week, I can't remember when it was, and I talked about the Cincinnati Bengals when they moved on from Carson Palmer back in 2011 and drafted Andy Dalton, and they got a first and second round pick for Carson Palmer. It's a little different situation though because Carson Palmer basically refused to play for the Bengals anymore, and that's probably not going to happen in Atlanta. And so basically the Bengals really had no choice but to trade Carson Palmer just to get anything out of that. But I think that the issue is, I think you can sit there and you can certainly make a case that if the Falcons are going to need time to build up their roster, and I think they can do it in 2, but I think it would have to really take great drafting in order to pull it off and great free agent. Like you just have to nail every offseason to do it. And I think what would need to happen, if you could do it in 2, then you get you trade Matt Ryan for a first or a second or a first and a third, and that helps you get the job done in 2 years as opposed to 3 or 4. But I think the issue is if you're going to take 3 or 4 years, and this is the case with the Bengals, you can make the argument that had they kept Carson Palmer and drafted all the players that they drafted over the next 3 or 4 years, the A.J. Greens, the Tyler Eiferts, the Gio Bernards, the Jeremy Hills, et cetera, that they would have been better off with Carson Palmer there than they were with Andy Dalton. You can make that case. Now, whether you agree or not, but it's a debate that's worthy of having. And you can also make the case that if Carson Palmer was on that team today, they'd be better right now. So I think that's sort of the issue with Matt Ryan. You can trade him and you can get picks for him and then hope that those picks can be used to build up this talent base on your roster. But then you're kind of stuck in a situation where if you miss on the next quarterback, you just wasted the next 4 years because it's not going to pay off for you. And I think it's a better strategy. You keep Matt Ryan, you still build up towards the draft for the next 3 or 4 years, and hopefully it pays off for you in the end. And if by 3 or 4 years from now you feel like Matt Ryan isn't the guy anymore, that's 3 or 4 off seasons where you've had a chance to draft a mid-round quarterback and maybe potentially develop him. So to me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to trade Matt Ryan. He's basically got to get a lot worse than what he is before you start really considering trading him to get value out of him, in my opinion. All right, Derek Hunter, aka at D-Rock the Party. What would you think of double dipping, like in 2013, at linebacker in the draft and going Myles Jack in the first and Kentrell Brothers in the second?
No. Oh. I mean, no. Just for me, no, because you just signed Durant, and I think if Durant gets some help next year, it's going to be better by default a little bit. I don't think he's been terrible, but he hasn't lived up to the talent that I think that he has, and I think just kind of rebooting next year with a huge upgrade next time will do wonders. I don't think you need to double dip round 1, round 2.
I think you got to replace both.
Okay. Now, I haven't seen a lot of Kentrell brothers. I've seen a little bit of him. I think he's a solid day two sort of linebacker, but he doesn't make me my mouth water in the same sense that Miles Jack does. So I don't feel like the value is quite there when you can use that pick on another position where you can get that sort of player. It's going to be like, oh, he's a major upgrade at that position. But I haven't seen a lot of Kentrell brothers, so don't take that as the final saying on that. Yeah, I wouldn't double dip at linebacker. I feel like if you can solidify the middle linebacker spot, you can sort of plug and play at the outside linebacker spots in this scheme. I think, when you watch the Seahawks defense over the last couple of years with Bobby Wagner, when Bobby Wagner's not in the unit, the rest of the linebackers look average. When Bobby Wagner's on the field, KJ Wright and all these other guys look great. And so I think if Miles Jack is going to be your Bobby Wagner, then you can sort of, I won't say fudge it, but you can kind of fudge it at the other two spots and just kind of just draft mid-round athletes in the 4th and 5th round and just kind of see who sticks and who doesn't. And you can go with guys like Durant and Wheeler and Stupar and sort of just be like, we got our middle guy and we'll be okay on the outside. All right. Evan Birchfield asks, what be more important to go after in the offseason, a wide receiver 2 or a tight end?
I personally think a tight end, a guy who can block and catch. Because this rotating Toilolo in as a blocker, Tammy in as a receiver, it tips the hand of what the offense is doing every single play. Because Tammy can't block with the shit, and Toilolo can't catch with the shit. So if Toilolo's in there, he's not going out for a pass, and if he is, he's not getting the ball thrown to him. If Tammy's in there, he's either not blocking or he's blocking poorly. You got to find someone who can do both. And I'm not saying get rid of Tammy. I like Tammy. You got to keep him, but don't have him as the main guy. Use him as an H-back. Use him as a slot receiver. Use him as the way you used to use Tony G, and then have your main tight end, someone who can actually block. Ideally, Jake Butt falls to the middle of the second.
Okay. Charles, where do you fall in this?
For me, it's kind of equal. Ben Gray's book, our buddy that moved to Australia, he said he made a really good point regarding Justin Hardy in the offense. It's okay to have Justin Hardy as your number 2 going forward. You just don't want him as a second receiving option in the offense, if that makes sense. So, if you bring in a tight end to kind of be that legit second receiving threat, kind of like Jordan Cameron was last year or the year before, that makes a lot of sense. I'm not saying Jordan Cameron specifically, but the wide receiver 2 and the tight end kind of have the same impact for me on this offense. Just you got to bring someone else who's a dangerous threat after the catch, who can make explosive plays, and whether that's a tight end or wide receiver 2 doesn't really matter to me.
I agree. I think you can make a case that if you can get a really good tight end in this offense, it will do more than a good wide receiver 2. But I think those type of tight ends are harder to come by nowadays. They don't sort of grow on trees anymore. Like if you can get a Travis Kelce or that type of player, or obviously a Gronk or somebody of that caliber, then that's more important. I think you can probably more easily find a good outside stretch receiver that can really help out this offense more than you can find a tight end. So I don't necessarily know if that makes it more important, but I do think it's probably you can if we come out of this offseason and haven't upgraded that wide receiver 2 spot, I'd be disappointed. If we come out of this offseason and haven't upgraded the tight end position, I will understand it more, I guess. That's what I'll say.
All I'm going to say is I hope Jordan might get out of Clemson teams, because I'd love to see him as a second or third round pick for the Falcons. He can block, he can catch, and I think he's the ideal guy.
Okay, Craig Phillips, the sniper for life, asks, what personnel changes do you see coming the next offseason?
Linebacker, receiver, and I think it's going to be tough to get rid of Levitri with his contract, but one of person Levitri has to go because they're just not a good fit next to each other. For me, just based off on the field play, I think I would give Person another chance next year and find an upgraded left guard, but I don't know how that works out contractually. So you got to find one interior guy to replace either Person or Levitri.
Person makes enough money to where he can find himself on the bench and be a good super backup. Levitri makes enough money to where you want to start him. You bring in Alex Mack, or you bring in a center who knows how to play football, and you let Person go, or you let Person go to the bench, or you move Person to right guard since Chester's contract is up, and find a center. But either way, you need a center. You don't need Mike Person playing center in the future. He is not a good center.
Yeah, I agree with Scott kind of on this. I think we'll see an upgrade at center. I think Levitri's contract pretty much guarantees that he's going to stick at his spot for one more year. I think middle linebacker is another spot. I think we'll see a new strong safety here, even though I'm sad to see Willie Mo go. He's been one of my favorite players over the last, what has it been, 6 years now. But I think the writing is on the wall that there will be new strong safety here next year. I think we'll see a different wide receiver too. Those are probably the main person, and I think we'll probably see an addition a major addition on the defensive line. Whether that comes in the draft or free agency, I don't know. But I think probably we'll see another defensive end come in at the least. And yeah, those would probably be the major. I would say bet on those ones, and we'll see about the rest of the roster.
Yeah, if I'll just say this: if Paul Warlow is still starting at middle linebacker next year, it's a colossal failure. There's just no reason that you can't find anybody better than him, and he's contributed to a lot of problems on defense.
Yeah, I agree with you, Charles. I think the only reason that Paul Warlow is a day one starter next year is if the guy we signed to replace him is injured, Durant is injured, Stupar is injured. Pretty much like the whole linebacker core is beat up, and Paul Warlow is only playing because he's the injury replacement. It makes no sense for this team to not have we'll be talking 6 months from now and be like, this guy is going to be the starter. And it's not going to be Paul Warlow. Okay, we got to another one from Andrew Schauweiler. He asks, is it just me or do the Falcons win this game if Devontae plays?
You mean against the
Bucks.
Vikings?
Or maybe he's talking about the Vikings. I thought he was talking about the Bucks.
Yeah, I think he's talking about the Vikings game.
Yeah, I think so. I think so because you probably don't have a long run. If you don't have a long run, you don't have that giant ass fumble from Tevin Coleman. I don't know.
I don't think so.
It's closer. I think it's definitely a closer game. I don't know if the Falcons pull it out because I feel like all those turnovers are just going to be field goals anyway. So that's not going to make a big difference.
Yeah, maybe you get a non-garbage time red zone touchdown, but someone's still got to tackle Adrian Peterson 30 times or 20 times, I guess. Someone's still got to.
They only have like 80 yards, which I mean is Adrian Peterson.
Who to 80 yards?
on the first 20 carries, Adrian Peterson only had like 80 yards. It was those last 9 that he had a ridiculous number of yards on. But that's the thing. You're going to run Adrian Peterson 30 times. You're going to get 150 yards out of him. He's that kind of back.
Yeah, but then you still got to guard Kyle Rudolph. You still got to tackle Stephon Diggs in the open field. It wasn't. I mean, Devonta would help, but the Vikings, they're just a better football team at this point. I don't think they win that game, regardless.
Yeah, I'm with you, Charles. I think Devontae makes it a lot harder for them to win, but I think the Vikings figure out a way to win that game regardless.
I don't think the defense was the issue for the game this week.
Well, it hasn't been the issue all season, really. It's not perfect, but it's definitely been a strength this year.
Yep, when they don't play Blaine Gabbert.
Even when they do play Blaine Gabbert, they only scored 17 points.
That's 17 too many for a Blaine Gabbert-led offense. That's my opinion. But, hey, whatever.
Even during this rough stretch of, this rough 6-week stretch, they've allowed 20 points per game. Your offense needs to score more than 20 points per game.
That's fair. Okay. At Cook in 23 asks, hypothetical, if Coleman doesn't fumble on his big run, does he get more yards than Peterson?
Probably. Because they probably stick with him.
Yeah. Well, wait, more yards than Peterson?
23 times.
I mean, maybe. I wouldn't be confident in saying yes. Maybe just on that run alone he gets 5 or 10 more yards if he doesn't fumble, but still, Adrian went off.
Yeah, I think if you're going to make a case that Coleman gets more yards than Peterson, it's because if he doesn't fumble, the Falcons don't fall behind. They go down and they score, and they can run the ball more the rest of the game than they did. And so, therefore, a cumulative effect that, maybe if Coleman gets maybe 8 more carries, he winds up with over 160 yards. Maybe. I don't know. It would definitely be a lot closer, but it would probably still end up with Peterson getting his yards and Coleman getting maybe 140 or something like that. So. Okay, D-Rock the party asks, bigger letdown this year on the D-line, Hageman or Claiborne? Flip side, bigger surprise on the D-line, Schofield or Tyson Jackson?
I'm one of those few that think Hageman and Claiborne have been doing good. Hageman's not supposed to be a great pass rusher. I was being super optimistic and hoping that he would be, but he's just not a great pass rusher yet. And he's got to learn how to use his hands when he pass rushes. Claiborne, on the other hand, knows how to use his hands when he pass rushes. He's just not a good run defender. And, I think all 4 of those guys have been good and have been contributing to the defensive line. I think the defensive line might be the strongest unit for the Falcons. I just don't think Tyson Jackson's worth keeping past this year because his contract isn't a good value. I think Claiborne hasn't been a letdown at all, though. He's hitting the quarterback. The Falcons aren't getting any sacks, but they are hitting the quarterback, which is better than what they were doing last year, which was not even creating pressure.
Yeah, I'm not let down by either Hageman or Claiborne if I had to pick between the two because I didn't have sort of these lofty expectations that Hageman was going to be this, dominant difference maker or anything like that. He's been perfectly fine at what I thought he was going to be this year. I would probably pick Claiborne among the two. I'm not as big a fan of Claiborne as probably most other people are. I think he's okay. He's not bad or anything. It's just, I don't know. He just always feels like when he's rushing the quarterback, he always feels like he's in the act of falling forward. and it just seems out of control. And I don't like the way it looks. That doesn't make him a bad player, but I just don't like the way it looks. Bigger surprise, Schofield's probably the right answer, but I would say just because Tyson Jackson got a pressure on Sunday, that's probably one more than people expected. So that might count as the biggest surprise. So.
Yeah, I think with I mean, I'm not disappointed with Hagman or Claiborne. I think they just kind of are who they are. You know, Hagman's going to be that run stopper. Claiborne's you're going to ask him to try to get after the passer and create room for Beasley. But the bigger surprise for me is Schofield because I didn't think that he could be as good a run defender as he's been so far.
I agree. All right, we got another one from Andrew Shawwaller. He asks, with you guys all watching tape on Matt Ryan and the Falcons, can Matt really not make players around him look better, or are these receivers just that bad outside of Julio?
Can I say it's a combination of both? I mean, Leonard Hagerson got cut by Washington last year. Eric Weems has never been anything more than a number 4 at best. Nick Williams hasn't made an NFL roster yet. Justin Hardy went in the 4th round, and he's going to be a project, but I mean, he's probably the best of that group, and he's just not ready because he didn't have a playbook in college. And Roddy White's old. Like, Roddy White is just old. That's his thing. It's not that he's awful. It's not like he forgot how to play football. He's just not good anymore. He's 35 years old and trying to play wide receiver in the NFL. He's Joe Horn in this final season, basically.
Yeah, it's a combination of both. Like I said earlier, Matt's not the guy that he has been, or I don't know, not that he's the guy that he has been. He's not a guy that's going to elevate the entire offense. It's just not he's just not good enough to do that. And the fact that we have trash receivers doesn't help anybody. So it's a combination.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. It's a combination of both. You know, I think I've spoken about the receivers a lot, so I don't need to go into that. I think the issue with Matt Ryan and why he's not able to elevate other players around him is partially because he's more of a precision passer. And the issue with Matt is he's not going to be a guy that's going to be able to throw in chaos. And you watch other quarterbacks play, and when they get off balance or they get off platform, they can throw they can throw it sidearm, they can throw it overhand, they can do whatever it has to do to get the ball out to the spot they need to do. And when you really watch Matt Ryan mechanically speaking, he sort of relies on the same footwork, the same release, the same trajectory all the time. And when you get him off of that, you can really mess up his game and you can really limit his accuracy. And then you throw that in with the fact that he doesn't have a big arm, and he really needs to be able to set his feet, and that's why one of the reasons why interior pressure makes him struggle so much, because he isn't able to set his feet and step into throws. And the thing that you look for with quarterbacks that can make the receivers better is they need to be able to put the ball in a spot where only the receiver can get. And that interception to Newman, like, to me, the reason why I'm not upset with the decision is because I think Matt Ryan can make that throw. He just, for whatever reason, didn't make that throw. And I think if you throw it high towards the back inline to where only Tammy can get the ball, Newman's not picking that off. Now, whether Tammy catches the ball or not, we don't know. But I think we've seen in past years where one of the reasons why Matt Ryan wasn't great as a vertical passer early in his career, because he was always overthrowing receivers, because he was always of the mindset of if you're long, you're never wrong. And that's the safe, conservative way of playing it. And I guess, yeah, I just think, Matt is what he is. We've seen him try. They did this in 2013 to disastrous results, where they gave him Harry Douglas, they gave him Drew Davis and Kevin Cohn and Darius Johnson, and said, hold down the fort until Roddy gets back. And it was terrible. He threw just as many interceptions. He threw probably more interceptions during that run, that 5 or 6 game run, than he has over the last 5 or 6 games. And so I think when you look at Matt Ryan's struggles, it's interesting to me that you go through a history when he was throwing to Harry Douglas, he'd throw a bunch of picks. Now it's when he's throwing to Roddy White, he throws a bunch of picks. And I think when Matt Ryan's turning the ball over, it's not necessarily a testament of him, but it's a reflection on the receivers. And like it's not to say that Matt Ryan isn't at fault for missing throws because he is, but I think when he's not fully dialed in and trusting his receivers like he does with Julio, like he has full 100% trust that he's going to throw the ball up and Julio's going to go get the football. Like we saw that against the 49ers when he threw it in triple coverage. It's like I don't care. Julio's going to get it.
On that second interception against the Vikings. He threw it up there. It was kind of a lobbing ball. And he was like, man, this is good enough for Tammy or Roddy to come back and come get it. And neither one of them came back for the ball. Now, that's not to say it was a good throw. It was an awful throw. But I think that he was being aggressive. I thought it was the right read. Both of them were open at the back of the end zone. He just lobbed it up there, and instead of giving them a shot at it and putting some zip on it and actually getting it to one of them, he decided to lob it up there and hope that they would go get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think basically in summary, I think Matt is what he is. We've seen him work with trash receivers and it doesn't work. And so I think the lesson needs to be not if the question is how do we fix Matt Ryan, don't give him trash receivers anymore. We've seen what he can do when he has great receivers. We saw it in 2012. So I don't think it's that complicated, but, Dimitroff, whatever.
On his 12 picks, 5 of them were targeting Roddy White. 3 of them were targeting Jacob Tamme. 2 of them were targeting Tevin Coleman. 1 of them was targeting Nick Williams, and 1 of them was targeting Julio Jones. And the one that was targeting Julio Jones, he overthrew Julio against the Redskins.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. You gotta make sure that you have the right targets for Ryan. So why not go out and get a guy like Dante Moncrief instead of drafting Desmond Southworth?
Another pick where you can say insert any name here instead of Desmond Southworth. So, next question comes from Andrew again. Why would Dan Quinn or Kyle Shanahan not fix the offense towards Matt? He looks uncomfortable in this offense. Look at Peyton and Kubiak's offense. Didn't look comfortable, but when he got to run his offense, in reference to Peyton's offense, he looked better. Matt needs no huddle.
When has Peyton Manning looked good this season? He's been awful the whole year.
Yeah, Peyton looked terrible this year. Ryan's actually looked good in the offense. He just Ryan doesn't need no help. The issue is Ryan is in his first year in the offense. Let him run the offense. Let him run the offense. There's growing pain. It's life.
At least with Matt, you can say you can look at it and say, okay, I can see glimpses of where it's gonna work, but it's just inconsistent because he's new and the receivers suck. That's it. Really.
Exactly. Get him better receivers and let him have some time in the offense. One of those you can fix this year. The other one you can't. You can't get him better receivers. You can play Justin Hardy instead of the other 3 schmucks behind him. But you're not going to get a better receiver unless Hester balls out and becomes Devin Hester of, 2009? 2010? When he had that great year. 1 year he had where he was targeted like 90 times, caught 70 of them, and looked like a legit NFL receiver running a bunch of West Coast underneath routes and then going deep every now and again.
Yeah, I mean, you look at people talk about the sort of night and day difference with the Falcons offense, and you can't help but notice, like, once Julio got injured, offense really hasn't clicked, right?
Yep.
Kind of a one-man team. It's unfortunate to say. I know, with the running game being improved, with the offensive line being improved, with the defense being better, it doesn't feel like they should be a one-man team, but they kind of are a one-man team. So, it's kind of what it is. Hopefully it gets fixed next year, but this year is kind of smoke and mirrors, and hope it works out for them. All right, at Matt Stars asks, is Jalen Collins getting better? Some bad penalties and targeting on third down hasn't flashed, in my opinion.
Watch the All-22. Flashed pretty well. Yep. There's times when he doesn't get targeted where he's making a great coverage play and it's not going to show up on film. that you're watching because you're just going to watch the broadcast. A lot of the stuff that you can see on all 22 is those outside corners doing their job. Collins, the aggravating thing about Collins to me is that he is not physical at all. If someone catches the ball, he runs around like a pansy trying to push him into someone else and tackle. Like, grow a pair and tackle a receiver. That's the aggravating thing with Collins. Other than that, I don't mind him. He does get a bad penalty here or there, but, I mean, he's a rookie. He's not going to be perfect.
Yeah, if you want to, if I had to point to one game where you could say, all right, is Jalen Collins going to be a good player? Show me his best game. Go watch his Tampa Bay game from earlier this year.
Yes.
Dude was locked down, strapped up all over the field, all over his man. He barely allowed any separation, and that's why you draft him, because he has the athletic profile where you can say, okay, athletically, he could be one of the top 15 corners in the league, but experience-wise and techniques-wise, he's just not there. Remember, at LSU, he didn't play that much. So you bring him in, and you're kind of throwing him into the fire against the NFL receivers. There's going to be a lot of ugly plays, but when you see the peaks, it's worth it. I think he's gonna be a good player once he figures it out.
Oh, yeah. That contract year when Collins is good and Alford is good and Trufant's one of the best in the NFL, that's going to be a great year.
Be next year?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Collins has certainly improved from where he was this summer. I think we're gonna have to. He's gonna go through growing pains because Charles Wright, his technique is sloppy and inconsistent. The run support issues that Scott talked about, like it's like sometimes that run support is just lazy. He's just lazy in it. And I think, again, he's another example of a rookie that I think he's going to get it together this offseason. And hopefully he'll get it together this offseason. And he'll start to clean up some of those things because I think they're going to ride him really hard this offseason because next year is the year that he needs to make his case to be the starter because Alfred's going to be a free agent after 2016. Trufant won't be because he'll have the fifth-year option, but basically we're pretty – we know Trufant's fine. He's not going anywhere for a long time. But it's really going to be next year where Collins has to make that growth to determine what Alfred's future is going to be, whether the Falcons are going to go out and do what the Seahawks didn't do, which was after they paid Sherman, they had the option of, do we want to pay Maxwell? Do we want to give a number 2 cornerback and pay him like a number 1 cornerback? The Seahawks said no. They wanted to keep Maxwell, but they weren't willing to pay him the money that he wanted to make. And I think Alfred's going to be in the same exact situation. I think some team is going to go out there because getting a number 1 cornerback is hard to do. And we see it every offseason where someone takes a number 2 cornerback and pays him like a number 1 cornerback, Dante Robinson. And I think Alfred's going to make a lot of money, and the Falcons are going to have to be stuck in a situation where they have to make a decision. Do we want to give Alfred the $30 or $40 million that he'll get on the open market, or do we want to roll the dice with Jalen Collins and bring in somebody else in the draft that can compete and fill that nickel spot a year from now or 2 years from now? So, I'm hoping that Jalen Collins really buckles down this offseason and really figures it out, because one of the knocks on him at LSU, and one of the reasons why he didn't play a lot was, at least according to Les Miles, was that he didn't practice very hard. And I think it takes time to sort of transition to understand, okay, you have to do all these little things, and I think that's the thing that Trufant has worked on. That's the thing that Alfred has definitely worked on. You have to work on your own to figure out all these things that you need to do as a cornerback, particularly in terms of technique. Brent Grimes did that, and that's one of the reasons why when he was here and for a short little while before the last couple of years in Miami, he was one of the best cornerbacks in the league. Dante Robinson never really worked on his technique, and he just sort of relied on his athleticism to get him by. And before his ACL injury, that wasn't a problem, but then after the ACL injury, you guys know what happened. So there you go. Okay, next one comes from Matt Stars. He says, how many times have we scored in a 2-minute offense? Seems like yet another offensive issue.
I have no clue.
A lot, but it's garbage time. Like, who cares?
Yeah, we got one last week in garbage time. So, hey.
Did they have one before halftime in San Francisco?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's 2. 1 doesn't count, so I don't know.
And we did score. It wasn't 2-minute offense, but it was no huddle against the Colts, right?
And there was one, yeah, and there was one against the Saints as well.
Yeah. So we just named 4. I'm sure there are other examples from the earlier in the season that we've forgotten.
Google works too.
Yeah. There you go. All right. Last one from Matt Stars. He asks, what is the identity of our offense?
Run the football. Set it up with explosive vertical passing games, which we haven't established yet, but it will be next season.
Pray.
A lot of play action. Yeah. That's basically what it's going to be. Heavily play action based offense with a lot of running from Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman, and Julio being Julio and whoever that number 2 receiver is getting a lot of big shots down the field. Okay. Evan Birchfield asks, what's the score prediction for the Bucs game?
Falcons win 24-20.
I want to say Buccaneers 27-23.
Oh, this is tough because I'm going to pick the Falcons, but I have zero confidence in the Falcons. So I'm going to say Falcons 20-17. All right, the last one comes from Brosive929. He says, what player would you want in the draft or free agency? So I guess this is, what player would you want the most?
One player?
Yeah.
Danny.
Okay, Charles, other than Miles Jack. What player other than Miles Jack?
Nathan.
Oh, this is a long shot, but hey, man, if you can get Muhammad Wilkerson, I'd be cool with that any day of the week.
Yeah.
That's my one long shot free agent. Get me Muhammad Wilkerson.
I saw him on the list of free agents when we were talking about the top 5, and I was like, I want to say Muhammad Wilkerson, but there's zero. Like, the Jets will be crazy if they don't tag him. He's going to get tagged.
It's like Alshon Jeffrey, man.
Yeah.
You know he's going to get tagged or something.
Yeah, like there's certain guys. Von Miller's going to get tagged. Some of these guys, it's just.
Oh, I do have one. Vinny Curry from Philly. I think he's definitely going to get let go. When he's on the field, he's been extremely productive. He's a guy that can kind of fill in that Michael Bennett role. He'd upgrade the pass rush on the interior and the exterior. So bring me anybody who can rush a passer realistically.
Von Miller would be fun. If you could somehow get him. Eric Berry is another one.
Yeah. Von Miller's not going anywhere. The only issue with Von Miller is whether he's going to get $105 million or $120 million.
Or Aldon Smith.
And he's suspended for next year?
He's suspended for part of it, but I'm sure you could find a good lawyer and appeal it.
Okay.
Most of it. Get him for 8 games.
I'm looking at this free agent list, and I'm seeing a couple of guys that I'm like, man, if they had only hit free agency like a couple of years ago when they were younger, like Derek Johnson, Evan Mathis, like Anquan Bolden, Antonio Gates, Eric Weddle. Yeah, Miles Jack or Deshaun Jackson. I'm fully in on the Deshaun Jackson bandwagon. That's my guy. And he's not a free agent, but I'm hoping he gets cut.
You know who I'd like to see? Gary Barnidge.
So he can beat Kamal Ishmael in coverage in the last second of a game to set up a game-winning field goal?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. That's my Gary Barnidge story. All right, folks. We appreciate you tuning in for this 2-hour episode of the podcast, the Falcons Central Radio podcast. We want to thank Charles for coming on with us. Charles, you're going to be posting that article tomorrow about Matt Ryan?
Yeah, tomorrow, Thursday morning. So be on the lookout for that. Draft stuff on the weekends as usual. Just this week I'll have one player to look out for each. Big championship game on Saturday for the Falcons potentially draft.
Okay. Charles is on Twitter at McDraft2, MCDraft2.
Oh, wait, one more thing. I am going to start posting draft content with Optimum Scouting with Eric Galco over there. So be on the lookout for that in the next couple of weeks, I guess.
Nice.
It is December. That means draft season is starting to gear up. All right, Scott, you got anything coming up now that you are on the Falcoholic family?
I've got something coming up on Friday, actually, breaking down all of Matt Ryan's interceptions.
There you go.
I wrote in about an hour today because I was bored.
You can thank me for the inspiration for that, guys.
That you were.
Yeah. I don't have anything specific planned that I was going to plan on writing this week, but I'll figure out something. You can check me out on Twitter at FalcFan. Scott is at KarasicPFS. Charles is at McDraft2, as I said. Check out their stuff on the Falcoholic. Check out my stuff on FalcFans.com. We'll try to get this episode up on iTunes. I know I've been dropping the ball on that lately, so I apologize for that. I've been saying that for the last couple of weeks and still have dropped the ball, so apologize for that. If you want to get your mailbag question answered, use the hashtag Falcons Mailbag. Tweet at me or Scott. Tweet at the show at FalconsPFC. And we'll see you guys next week to talk about the Falcons' win over the Buccaneers.
I'm Ron Burgundy.